be premature. Well, I was letting you in on a secret. I was nervous. And I was hoping that that would establish a rapport and, you know, then you'd like me and feel like we can communicate. Hopefully that built a connection between us, right? Okay. So one final word on communication. It's a little anecdotal. It has nothing to do with this business school lecture, but please indulge me. Okay, my husband and I have a friend of ours who we've known for many, many years, and sometimes she likes to joke with us about the stereotypical differences in our religions. See, she's Christian, and my husband and I, we are Jewish. And sometimes she'll make incredibly offensive jokes about our differences. And we all laugh because we're very close friends. We've been friends for a long time. She can joke this way with us, and we don't get offended. And one time, our Christian friend brought over her new boyfriend, who wanted very much to be a part of our group and fit in right away. And consequently, on this very first night that we met him, he started making jokes about Jewish stereotypes. Well, that wasn't funny. It somehow rang as anti-Semitic, actually. I don't know him. He hasn't earned the right to do that with me. He hasn't earned the right to tell those types of jokes. Why do I bring this up? Well, I think this story serves a purpose. When entering into a new environment, which you will do, don't feel as if you have to fit in right away. That usually leads to talking for the sake of talking, which is something that you don't want to do. I suggest you take the first 3 months of any new job and listen more than you talk. Learn the culture. Learn people's communication styles. As my kid's karate teacher says, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you can listen twice as much as you talk. That's the best way to learn how and where you fit in. And to be clear, you don't have to fit in right away, but you do eventually have to fit in. And that brings me to my second rule for navigating whatever political landscape you find yourself in, and that is perception is often more times important than results. I'll be the first to admit this concept is an unfair one. After all, shouldn't your success be directly correlated to the amount of work that you put in and the results that you are culminated from all that hard work? It should, but it isn't. Not entirely. And that's not just in corporate America. Look at Hollywood. How many times has someone won an Oscar because it's just their time? That doesn't have to do with quality. Not the quality of their work or the money that it brought in, although I did see Revenant. I thought it was awesome. I don't know if you guys did. Look, in the business world, which is supposedly all about the bottom line, your worth as an employee is actually more about the bottom line that you project than the bottom line that you bring in. More often than I'd care to admit, the confidence that you have, the clothes that you wear, say more about you than your numbers. And that's not to say the bottom line isn't important, because it is important. But if you're able to project confidence when the bottom line is not in your favor, you can still do well. If, however, you bring executive level business, but you don't look the part, you may not be an executive. Now, I'm generalizing. There are definitely exceptions to this rule. John Lasseter, he wears Hawaiian shirts every single day. Steve Jobs wore a black turtleneck and jeans all the time. And the head of Disney Games, he wore dirty t-shirts and he ate with his hands. Still does. And perhaps I am understating the importance of results just a bit, but I am definitely not overstating the importance of perception. I worked at Nickelodeon, where the president, the CMO, and the COO all happened to be women. And that was part of my excitement when I joined the company. These executives are smart and savvy, and they are very sharp dressers. On my first day, I was told if I had a meeting with any of the bosses, I should be dressed appropriately. Look, it shouldn't matter what I wear, right? But if I have a meeting with them, I better bring my A game, and that includes down to the shoes I'm wearing. I was told that. One time, the president of Nickelodeon, a driver in every sense of the word, who rarely had spoken to me, noticed my loafers. And then we started talking about La Canadienne, this Montreal shoe company where I'd gotten them. And guess what? She knows my name now. So back to the story about the wagon. When I was starting out at Disney Consumer Products, one of my jobs was to deliver contractual samples to all the members of the toy team. There were over 20 members of the team, managers, directors, vice presidents, executive vice presidents, and each one of these individuals would receive a sample of every product that we developed. So every few days when a big shipment would come in, I would load up this red flyer wagon and I would take it down the hall and I would give out contractual samples to every single person on the team. During one of these deliveries, I was pulled aside by our executive vice president, a guy who had taken a liking to me, thought I had potential, and he said, let me give you a piece of advice. If you want to move up around here, don't let them see you pull the wagon. But it's inefficient to hand deliver these packages one at a time. A lot of times because of the size of the samples, Legos, these huge sets. You'd have to take 20 trips down the hall just to deliver one contractual sample to each person, instead of one trip down the hall pulling the wagon. My results in terms of how efficiently and quickly I could do the job were better when I pulled the wagon. But when they see you pull the wagon, they don't see someone who is being smart and efficient. They see someone who is pulling a wagon. And suddenly that's all they see you doing. I know this seems counterintuitive. I was working smarter, not harder. And shouldn't that be praised? It should. A lot of times it is. I'm certainly a big advocate for it. In fact, I didn't stop pulling the wagon. I just did it after hours. I did it after the bosses left. Look, counterintuition, it's not uncommon in a big corporation. At the Walt Disney Company, when a meeting was put on calendar, usually standard procedure was to have a pre-meeting to talk about that meeting, and then we'd have a post-meeting to discuss what we had talked about in the meeting. And usually that meeting was about efficiency. So though it may be counterintuitive, though it may require you to stay late sometimes, I would echo the advice that was given me many years ago: don't let them see you pull the wagon. Ironically, 10 years after this advice was given me during a turbulent time, massive layoffs at Disney, that same executive vice president who had mentored me, unfortunately, was let go. He had to empty his office of all the many samples that I had delivered, and I saw him walking to his car, and he was pulling the wagon. I'm not kidding. How are you perceived? Are you perceived as someone who can pull the wagon? Or is the perception of you someone that can move up the ladder? Perception is something you want to start thinking about soon, right away, before they have a thought of what you are. It's very hard to change it once they have a decision about you. How do you put the toothpaste back in a tube? When it comes to being promoted, I can tell you that people don't promote you because they think you can do the job. They promote you because they think you are doing the job. In fairness, oftentimes you are. But what's important is that they think you are. They think you're working at that next level. Another piece of advice, I was told earlier in my career that I needed to act as if. Act as if I already had the thing I wanted. If I was an assistant manager and I wanted to be a manager, I had to act like a manager, dress the part, do the part, still do the assistant manager work, but do the manager part too. I wouldn't be stepping on the toes of my manager because she'd be working on the senior manager role. And as a way of wrapping up this section on perception, I actually want to tell you a story about my husband, who used to work at Disney Consumer Products. He left the company years ago to pursue his passion of writing, and he now writes for television, reality television, and theater. But years ago, he was a company man trying to work his way up the ladder like the rest of us. My husband is a very smart man. He was an excellent worker at Disney, and everyone loved him, particularly because he was so funny. I know that is one of the reasons why I love him, because he is funny. And ultimately, or unfortunately, sorry, he could not get promoted no matter how hard he worked. And one day his boss pulled him aside, and I kid you not, she said to him this stark reality. If you want to be promoted, she said, you have to stop being funny all the time. Now, I realize I run the risk of contradicting myself with this story. I told you earlier you should add comedy to your presentation as a way of engaging your audience. But I also said don't overdo it. And my husband has the unfortunate burden of being really funny most of the time. Consequently, the perception of him was that he was silly. My husband is not silly. He's actually a really, really hard worker. He takes his work very seriously. He takes comedy very seriously. But that was the perception of him. And as I said earlier, once they have a perception of you, it is very hard to change it. So his boss said to him, if you want to be promoted, you have to stop being funny. And it's kind of stupid to say if you want to be promoted, because who doesn't want to be promoted, right? She said to him, if you want to be promoted, you have to stop being funny. And he responded cheerfully, you think I'm funny? And then he gave his notice and he walked out the door and never turned back because corporate America wasn't for him. The last thought that I want to share with you is my view on karma as it relates to cause and effect. Karma is basically how your actions, cause, influence your future effect. So if you do good deeds, you have future happiness. And if you do bad deeds, you have future suffering. Whether you believe it or not, if you pretend karma is a thing, you will see results. All right. So the other founder of Pixar Animation Studios is the brilliant Ed Catmull. I like to call him the left side of the brain. If John is the right side, the creative side, Ed is the left side. He is a full-on analytic communicator. He's a computer genius. His discoveries include texture mapping, algorithms for spatial anti-aliasing, and refining subdivision surfaces. He also independently discovered Z buffering. Anyway, right? He was being interviewed for a job at Lucasfilm back in 1979. George Lucas was looking for someone to head up a group to bring computer graphics and video editing into the entertainment field. Most of you weren't alive back then, I'm just realizing that. During the interview, George Lucas apparently asked Ed if there were any others in the industry who could do what he was doing. Ed immediately started naming 4 or 5 other computer tech guys who he believed to be just as good, if not better, than he would be for that position. And that was the moment that he landed the job at Lucasfilm. George Lucas had already interviewed all the men he had named, and he realized that he was taken by what Ed had done there. Ed's transparency, his honesty, his openness to risk not landing the job was the reason why he got the job. These other potential candidates did not get the job because they didn't give up a name. And then Ed Catmull was hired on that day, and he went on to become the chief technical officer of Lucasfilm. He worked alongside Steve Jobs, and eventually he founded Pixar Animation Studios. And I love that story because it says so much about how I want to be as a leader, how I want to be as a worker, and how I want to live my life. I take meetings with anybody who wants to talk to me about their career. I forward resumes on to HR whenever it's appropriate. And I try to help anyone out as best I can because, 1, I remember what it was like to be graduating college and not knowing where I was going to go and just wanting to get my foot in the door somewhere. And 2, I believe in karma. Several years ago, Walmart had a big meeting at Pixar. It was on the Pixar campus in Emeryville, California, and I was one of the many hosts for the day. It was extremely hectic. We were hosting 20 Walmart executives. There was crazy logistics. We had to have them all sign non-disclosure agreements on anything that they saw that day. We had to move them from meetings to screenings and then eventually get them into the atrium for lunch. And just as the meetings were ending, I was headed back to my office, sorry, I keep doing that, to catch up on 100 of emails that I probably had missed throughout the day because I was so busy. And the head Disney sales guy for Walmart, he asked me if I would give him a tour of the Pixar campus. It takes 45 minutes, and that's a basic tour at Pixar because it's a huge campus. And I was totally swamped that day, and it wasn't part of my job responsibilities to give this guy from Walmart a tour of Pixar. I could have easily said, unfortunately security won't let me do that, sorry, gotta stay with the group. But I did it. Why did I do it? Well, because I believe karma is a thing. I was busy, I was not in the mood, but I knew it would be a treat for this guy who knows, he was from Arkansas, Bentonville, Arkansas, who knows if he was ever gonna get up to Pixar again. And the tour put both of us in a great mood. We had a great time, and I can't remember if I ever got back to those emails, but I'm sure I got to them eventually. And that was back in 2010. In 2012, that same guy from Walmart, he left, and he went and became the international head of sales at Nickelodeon and MTV. And when the role of vice president creative strategy was created, guess who he recommended for the job? In 2013, Nickelodeon not only hired me for that vice president role, they helped me move my home from Los Angeles to the East Coast. They physically helped us move. They packed us up. They moved my husband, my kids, my 2 dogs. They put us into temporary housing in New York City where we got to live for the summer, and they eventually helped us find and buy our house in Montclair. That man changed my life. I barely knew him, but he remembered how I'd taken care of him at Pixar 2 years prior, and from that interaction alone, he he thought I'd be a good fit for the Nickelodeon culture. I'm so thankful he did that. Karma is a thing. Live your life as if karma is a thing, and that means work with integrity. That means be honest, but be sensitive to people's feelings. That means be kind to that cleaning lady who comes in your office after hours and cleans out your garbage. Do unto others as you would have done to them. I think that has value in the corporate world. It certainly has for me. My father was an attorney in North Carolina who owned his own law firm for over 50 years. And he used to say to me, honey, you don't know much about business, but you must be doing something right because they keep promoting you. And the fact is, I've done just as many things wrong as I've done right, starting with not getting that MBA. I've had to rely on my ability to influence people, and that's all navigating corporate politics really is. It's about influence. How do you influence the people you work with, the people who you will probably spend more time with than your own family, for the betterment of the company, for the betterment of yourself? I believe developing your ability to communicate effectively, understanding the power of perception, and creating good karma are instrumental. Though truth be told, what influences me most is people who are really good at what they do. So I want to circle back to the playing to their strengths slide, which doesn't mean ignoring your weaknesses. You should absolutely be developing those and grow. But it is the things that you do best that will open the most doors for you and have the greatest impact on whatever corporate environment you find yourself in. So hopefully, if I've had any success in navigating the politics in this room, you will be influenced to be brave and find the things that you do best and lean on those. Thank you. Please ask a question, because I only gave you 30 minutes. They wanted an hour. I couldn't even think of myself speaking for an hour, much less you listening. Please ask about Nickelodeon, Pixar.
Just raise your hand and we'll run a microphone to you. Up here.
You're all Nickelodeon people. I know it, because you're in your 20s. You knew Snick. I know it. That's all right. Go to class.
What was your favorite project to work on?
What was my favorite project to work on? At Disney? Or either? Okay, my favorite project to work on, and you can go on YouTube and find this maybe, is I don't think when I worked at Disney I realized how exciting it actually was to work with John Lasseter. And if any of you are animation geeks, which I kind of was, I now realize after the fact how cool it really was. But I had to produce John Lasseter when he would speak into the camera, and a lot of times Mattel, these big companies that did work for Disney, would have their big off-site for the year, and they would ask us if John could just look into the camera and say, you know, hey Mattel, welcome to your year-end meeting. Wish I could be there with you. This is John Lasseter. You know, have a good time. And I think I loved producing those videos where it was just John and me and the makeup artist and the cameraman. And, you know, I was with the global elite. And I